Commander Jake Morrison sat in the large meeting room of Galactic Station Prime, watching the holographic displays flicker with data from across the galaxy. The station was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth, and it served as the main hub where different alien species met to talk business and politics. Today's meeting was supposed to be routine, just another boring discussion about trade routes and mining rights. The meeting room itself was impressive. The ceiling stretched high above them, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. The tall ones from Rigel needed extra space, while the crystal beings from the Vega system preferred to hover near the floor. Jake had been to dozens of these meetings over the past 2 years, and he still found it amazing that so many different life forms could work together. Ambassador Zekthara, a blue-skinned Zephyrion with 4 arms and large black eyes, stood at the center of the room. Her species had been mining asteroids and small planets for centuries, and they were known throughout the galaxy for their careful, methodical approach to everything. That's why Jake found it strange when she mentioned having a small problem with one of their operations. "The mining station on Kepler 442b has gone silent," she said, her voice carrying the usual melodic tone of her people. "We lost contact 3 days ago. The last transmission showed unusual energy readings from the antimatter containment systems." Jake leaned forward in his chair. Antimatter was dangerous stuff. On Earth, they used tiny amounts for spacecraft fuel, but the Zephyrians used it to power their massive mining operations. If something went wrong with containment, it could destroy the entire planet. The other delegates began talking at once. The mechanoid representative, a robot-like being made of silver metal, started calculating probabilities with a series of beeps and clicks. The Vorthan counselor, who looked like a giant turtle with purple skin, suggested forming a committee to study the situation. The crystal beings hummed in harmony, which Jake had learned meant they were discussing something in their strange musical language. "We need to evacuate the system immediately," declared the mechanoid. "The probability of catastrophic failure is 87%. "But what about the mining crew?" asked Jake. "Are they still alive?" Ambassador Zekthara's large eyes looked sad. "We do not know. The station houses 43 Zephyrian workers. If they are alive, they are trapped." The room erupted in more discussion. The Vorthan suggested sending a long-range probe to gather information. The crystal beings wanted to contact their homeworld for advice. The mechanoid started listing safety protocols that would take weeks to implement. Jake listened to all of this and felt his patience running thin. He had seen this before. Aliens were smart, maybe smarter than humans in many ways, but they loved to talk about problems instead of solving them. They would form committees, run simulations, and debate for months while people died. It reminded him of the worst kinds of meetings back on Earth, except with higher stakes. The energy readings suggest a cascade failure in the antimatter matrix. Zekthara continued, "Our experts estimate it will take 6 months to assemble a proper rescue team. We need specialists in quantum mechanics, antimatter physics, and dimensional engineering." 6 months? Jake stood up. "Those people could be dead by then. Hell, the whole planet could be gone." "Commander Morrison," the Vorthan counselor said slowly, "you must understand that this is not a simple repair job. The forces involved could tear apart the fabric of space itself. We cannot risk making the situation worse." Jake looked around. The room had all the worried faces. These beings had technology that seemed like magic to him. They could travel between stars, manipulate matter at the molecular level, and communicate across vast distances instantly. But when faced with a real crisis, they froze up like deer in headlights. "Look," Jake said, "I get that this is dangerous. But sitting here talking about it isn't going to save those miners. Someone needs to go there and figure out what's happening." The risk is too great," the mechanoid replied. "Even our most advanced ships could be destroyed by the antimatter reaction." Jake felt that familiar feeling rising in his chest. It was the same feeling he got when faced with impossible odds during his military service. When the experts said something couldn't be done, when the smart people gave up, when everyone else stepped back and shook their heads. That was when humans stepped forward. "Fine," Jake said, his voice calm but determined. "I got this." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every alien in the room stopped talking. The crystal beings' humming cut off abruptly. The mechanoids' lights stopped blinking. Even the air recycling system seemed to pause. Then the alarm started. Red lights flashed throughout the station. Emergency klaxons blared with a sound that hurt Jake's ears. Blast doors began sliding shut with deep, rumbling sounds. The holographic displays switched to emergency mode, showing evacuation routes and safety protocols. "Attention all personnel," an automated voice announced in dozens of languages. "Human intervention protocol activated. All non-essential personnel. Report to designated safe zones immediately." "This is not a drill." Jake looked around in confusion. "What the hell is happening?" Ambassador Zekthara was already backing toward the exit, her forearms moving in what Jake recognized as a nervous gesture. "Commander Morrison, you said the words. The protocol has been activated." "What words? What protocol?" "But the aliens? We're already leaving." The mechanoid rolled quickly toward the door, its metal feet clanking on the floor. The Vorthan moved with surprising speed for something that looked like a giant turtle. The crystal being simply vanished, probably teleporting to safety. Within minutes, Jake was alone in the meeting room. The alarms continued to wail, and he could hear the sound of blast doors sealing throughout the station. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. He walked to the nearest computer terminal and tried to access the station's systems. Most functions were locked down, but he could see the evacuation status. Thousands of beings were moving to protected areas. Deep within the station, ship bays were being sealed. The entire station was going into lockdown mode. "What the hell did I do?" Jake muttered to himself. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amy Foster, the human physicist assigned to his team, appeared on the communication screen. She was calling from the human quarters, which apparently weren't affected by the lockdown. "Jake, what did you do?" she asked. "The whole station is freaking out. There are aliens running around like the world is ending." "I just said I would handle the mining station problem," Jake replied. "Next thing I know, alarms are going off everywhere." Amy was quiet for a moment. "Oh no." "Jake, you didn't say I got this, did you?" "Yeah, so what?" "So what?" "Jake, there are stories about what happens when humans say those words. Apparently, the galaxy has learned to take cover when we volunteer to solve problems." Jake stared at the screen. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Remember what happened on Proxima Station? Or the incident with the solar flare? Every time humans get involved, physics seems to stop working normally." Before Jake could respond, the communication system crackled to life. A nervous voice spoke in accented English. "Commander Morrison, this is Station Control. We have prepared a ship for you and your team. Please proceed to Bay 7. When you are ready to depart for Kepler 442b, we ask that you complete your mission as quickly as possible so that normal operations can resume." Jake looked at the empty meeting room, then back at Amy's worried face on the screen. "Well," he said, "I guess we're going to save some miners." The alarms continued to wail as Jake left the room, walking through corridors that had been bustling with activity just minutes before. Now they were empty except for the occasional security drone and the flashing red lights of the emergency system. He had no idea that his simple offer to help had triggered one of the most comprehensive safety protocols in galactic history. All he knew was that people were in danger, and he had a job to do. The galaxy would just have to deal with it. Jake Morrison walked through the empty corridors of Station Prime, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls, and the sound of blast doors sealing could be heard in the distance. He still couldn't understand why his offer to help had caused such panic. In the Vorthan emergency shelter, deep within the station's protected core, Ambassador Veltar huddled with dozens of other beings. The shelter was designed to protect against everything from meteor strikes to quantum explosions. Today, it was being used to protect against something far more unpredictable: human ingenuity. Tell me again about the Proxima incident, whispered a young Zephyrian aide who had never encountered humans before. Ambassador Veltar's large eyes grew distant. It was 3 years ago. Dr. Katie Bell was working on a research station near Proxima Centauri. A plague had broken out among the colonists, something that attacked the nervous system. Our best doctors said it was impossible to cure. The infection was too complex, too aggressive. The aide leaned closer. What happened? Dr. Bell asked for a sample of the plague. Then she injected herself with it. Gasps echoed through the shelter. The concept was so alien to most species that it was hard to believe. She deliberately infected herself? Asked a mechanoid, its voice full of static from shock. Yes, Veltar continued. She said her immune system would figure out how to fight it. For 3 days, she was dying. The other humans on the station refused to leave her side. They just kept saying she knew what she was doing. And then, the aide pressed. On the 4th day, she woke up. Not only was she cured, but her blood had somehow developed antibodies that worked on all the colonists. She had turned her own body into a living laboratory and created a cure that our best scientists couldn't make in their labs. The shelter fell silent. Everyone knew the story, but hearing it again never failed to amaze them. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, the Mechanoid Union was reviewing their files on human interventions. The data was stored in a heavily encrypted database that only the highest-ranking officials could access. Unit Prime 7 scrolled through the records, its optical sensors glowing brighter with each entry. File 1247, the Rigel Solar Flare, it announced to the other units. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, Human Naval Forces. Solar flare threatened to destroy 3 inhabited planets. Conventional deflection impossible due to flare's magnitude. Solution? Asked Unit Prime 3. Rodriguez flew her ship directly into the corona of the star. She used the ship's gravitational field generators to create what she called a gravity bomb. The explosion redirected the flare away from the inhabited worlds. Probability of success? Unit Prime 5 inquired. According to our calculations, 0.0001%. The heat and radiation should have vaporized her ship before she could activate the device. Yet she succeeded. Yes, she and her crew survived. The ship was heavily damaged, but they managed to return to base. When asked how she knew the plan would work, she reportedly said, I didn't. But someone had to try. The units processed this information in silence. Human logic was a constant source of confusion for the mechanoids. They operated on probability and logic, but humans seemed to operate on something else entirely. In the crystal being meditation chamber, the ethereal beings hummed in harmonious frequencies that created beautiful patterns in the air. They were discussing the most troubling case of all. The Asteroid Pirates of Vega. The crystal song told the story of engineer Tony Adams, who had been assigned to protect a shipping lane that was being terrorized by space pirates. The pirates had hidden bases throughout an asteroid field, making them nearly impossible to catch. They would attack merchant ships and disappear back into the rocks. Tony had studied the problem for exactly 1 day before proposing his solution. He wanted to turn the entire asteroid field into a weapon, using mining charges and gravity manipulation. He had caused a chain reaction that sent thousands of asteroids flying in carefully calculated trajectories. The pirates found themselves caught in a deadly maze of flying rocks with no way to escape. Within hours, the entire pirate fleet was destroyed. What made the story even more incredible was that Tony had done all the calculations in his head. No computer models, no simulations, just pure human intuition and mathematics. When the crystal beings asked him how he knew it would work, he had shrugged and said, "Seemed obvious to me." Back in the human quarters, Jake was trying to understand what was happening. Dr. Amy Foster had gathered all the humans on the station in their common room. There were only 12 of them, but they represented Earth's diplomatic and scientific mission to the galaxy. "Okay," Jake said, "someone explain to me why the entire station went into lockdown when I said I would help." Amy pulled up a holographic display showing news articles from across the galaxy. "Jake, we have a reputation. Every time humans solve a problem, We do it in ways that make no sense to other species. Like what? Like Sam Miller blowing up that black hole last year? Jake turned to look at Sam, a quiet man in his 30s who worked in demolitions. You blew up a black hole? Sam shrugged. It was a small one. And it was going to eat that research station anyway. I just gave it something bigger to chew on. How do you blow up a black hole? Carefully, Sam replied. Also, you need a lot of antimatter and really good timing. Pilot Rick Davis spoke up. From the corner. Remember when I had to land that diplomatic ship with no engines? That was different, Amy said. You used atmospheric pressure and solar wind to create lift? Yeah, but I had to fly through 3 different gravity wells to do it. The Zephyrians still don't understand how I kept the ship in one piece. Jake was beginning to understand. So the aliens think we're dangerous? Not dangerous, Amy corrected. Unpredictable. We solve problems in ways that shouldn't work. We take risks that seem suicidal, and somehow we usually succeed. Usually? Well, there was that incident with the dimensional gateway, Rick said quietly. We don't talk about the dimensional gateway. Amy said quickly. Jake decided not to ask about that one. Instead, he looked around at his team. These were good people, smart people, but they didn't seem like the kind of individuals who would terrify an entire galaxy. So what's different about us? He asked. Amy thought for a moment. I think it's how we approach problems. Most species try to find the safest solution, the one with the highest probability of success. We just try to find something that works. And that scares them? Jake, yesterday a Vorthan engineer spent 6 months designing a robot to change a light bulb. They ran computer simulations, stress tests, and safety protocols. The robot was beautiful, efficient, and completely safe. Sounds reasonable. Tony fixed the same problem by standing on a chair and screwing in a new bulb. It took him 30 seconds, Jake laughed. That's not exactly revolutionary. To them it is. They see us taking shortcuts that should be impossible. We succeed where they fail, but they can't understand how we do it. Sam looked up from his tablet. The ship is ready. They want us to leave as soon as possible. Right, Jake said. Let's go save some miners. As they prepared to leave, Amy pulled up one final file on her tablet. Jake, there's something else. You should know. The Galactic Council has been keeping track of our interventions. They've labeled us as a Class 7 unpredictable species. What does that mean? It means they think we're more dangerous than most natural disasters. They have protocols for dealing with supernovas, black holes, and quantum storms. But they have no idea what to do with us. Jake stood up and headed for the door. Well, they're about to find out. The team gathered their equipment and headed for the ship bay. Behind them, the station remained in lockdown, with thousands of beings waiting in shelters for the humans to leave. It was a routine that had become depressingly familiar across the galaxy. As they walked through the empty corridors, Jake couldn't help but smile. He was starting to understand why the aliens were so nervous. Humans didn't just solve problems. They rewrote the rules of what was possible, and that, apparently, was the most terrifying thing in the universe. The human ship Swift Arrow left Station Prime 3 hours after the emergency protocols had been activated. It was a modified Zephyrian vessel, built for speed and equipped with the latest scanning equipment. Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's seat next to Rick Davis, watching the stars streak by as they traveled toward the Kepler system. How long until we reach the planet? Jake asked. About 6 hours at maximum speed, Rick replied. The Zephyrians gave us their fastest ship, probably hoping we'll finish this quickly and get back to normal space. Behind them, Dr. Amy Foster was studying the data they had received about the mining station. The information was limited, but what they had was troubling. Sam Miller sat nearby, cleaning his equipment and preparing for whatever they might find. The last transmission from the station was 3 days ago, Amy said, reading from her tablet. The energy readings show massive fluctuations in the antimatter containment field. Then everything just stopped. Stopped how? Jake asked. The station disappeared from all sensors. Long-range scans show empty space where it should be. Sam looked up from his equipment. How does a mining station just disappear? That's what we're going to find out, Jake said, back on Station Prime. The emergency shelters were packed with worried aliens. The Vorthan Council had set up a monitoring station to track the human mission. High Counselor Thane sat before a wall of screens, watching the data streams from the Kepler system. Any word from the humans? Asked his aide. They are still traveling to the planet. The real problem will begin once they arrive. Ambassador Zekthara joined them at the monitoring station. Her forearms moved nervously as she watched the displays. I should not have mentioned the mining station. Now Commander Morrison and his team are flying into what may be a death trap. You did the right thing, Thane said. The miners are my people's responsibility. But sending humans to fix the problem may have made things worse. How could it be worse? Thane brought up a classified file on his screen. 3 years ago, humans tried to help with a similar situation. A research station had an antimatter accident near the Rigel system. The human response team went in to investigate. What happened? They fixed the problem. But their solution involved creating a temporary black hole, redirecting a solar flare, and somehow reversing the flow of time in a small area of space. The physics department at the Galactic University is still trying to understand how they did it. Zekthara stared at the screen. They reversed time? For approximately 17 minutes. The research station crew was rescued, the antimatter was contained, and normal space resumed. But the area still shows strange readings. Ships avoid it completely. Meanwhile, the Swift Arrow was approaching the Kepler system. The ship's sensors were already detecting unusual readings from the planet's location. Rick slowed their approach. As they got closer, I'm getting some weird readings here, he said. The planet is there, but the mining station isn't showing up on any sensors. Amy moved to the science station and started running detailed scans. That's impossible. The station mass is over 50,000 tons. It should be visible on every sensor we have. Maybe it was destroyed in the accident, Sam suggested. No, Amy said, studying the data. Look at these quantum readings. The space around the planet is completely messed up. It's like reality is twisted into knots. Jake leaned over her shoulder to look at the display. The readings made no sense to him, but Amy's expression told him everything he needed to know. This was bad. Talk to me, Amy. What are we looking at? The antimatter containment failure created what I can only describe as a pocket dimension. The mining station didn't disappear. It got pulled into a separate space that exists alongside our normal reality. Can we get to it? Theoretically, yes. But the pocket dimension is unstable. It's slowly expanding and consuming more of normal space. If we don't do something soon, it will eventually swallow the entire planet. Rick brought the ship to a complete stop, still several thousand miles from the planet. So what's the plan? Amy continued studying the readings. The only way to reach the mining station is to enter the pocket dimension. But the space inside doesn't follow normal physics. Gravity, time, and energy all behave differently. How differently? Jake asked. I have no idea. The sensors can't penetrate the dimensional barrier. We would be flying blind. Sam joined them at the science station. What about the miners? They still alive? The pocket dimension seems to be in a state of temporal flux. Time moves differently inside. They could have been trapped for days, or it might have been only minutes from their perspective. Jake looked at the displays showing the twisted space around the planet. Any reasonable person would call for backup, wait for experts, or find a safer way to approach the problem. But the miners were running out of time, and he had made a promise. All right, he said. How do we get in there? Amy stared at him. Jake, you don't understand. This isn't like our other missions. The pocket dimension is completely unstable. If we go in there, we might not be able to get out. But we can reach the mining station? Maybe if we can navigate through twisted space, survive the dimensional barriers, and somehow stabilize the antimatter reaction from inside the pocket dimension. And if we don't? The pocket dimension will continue to expand until it consumes the entire star system. Billions of people on nearby worlds will die. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. The smart thing to do would be to return to Station Prime and let the aliens figure out a safer solution. But that would take months, and the miners would be dead by then. What do you need to make this work? He asked. Amy pulled up a schematic of their ship. We need to modify the hull to withstand dimensional stress. The engines will need to be recalibrated for non-standard physics. And we need some way to stabilize the antimatter reaction once we find the station. How long will that take? With proper equipment and a full engineering team, about 6 months. Sam looked up from his equipment. How long if we jury-rig it? With what we have on the ship? Amy hesitated. Maybe 4 hours. But the modifications would be completely untested. We would have no idea if they would work until we try to enter the pocket dimension. Jake nodded. Do it. Jake, this is insane. We're talking about modifying a ship to enter a dimension where physics doesn't work normally. The chances of success are practically zero. What are the chances of success if we don't try? Amy was quiet for a moment. 0. Then we don't really have a choice, do we? Back on Station Prime, the monitoring station was tracking the human ship's movement. High Counselor Thane watched as the swift arrow came to a stop near the planet. They found the anomaly, he said to his aide. What will they do now? Knowing humans, they will probably try to fly directly into it. On the screen, they could see the swift arrow's engine shut down and the ship's external lights dim. Energy readings showed the humans were making modifications to their vessel. Are they actually going to enter the pocket dimension? Zekthara asked. It appears so, Thane replied. Alert all monitoring stations. If the humans succeed, we need to record everything they do. If they fail, we need to know what went wrong. Across the galaxy, alien scientists and military officials gathered around screens to watch the human mission. They had seen humans accomplish impossible things before, but this seemed beyond even their capabilities aboard the Swift Arrow. The team worked frantically to modify their ship. Rick rerouted power systems to strengthen the hull. Sam prepared explosive charges that might be needed to destabilize the antimatter reaction. Amy recalibrated the sensors and navigation systems. For the strange physics they would encounter, Jake coordinated their efforts, making decisions that would have terrified any other species. They were about to fly into a pocket dimension where the laws of physics had broken down, armed with nothing but jury-rigged equipment and human determination. How are we doing? Jake asked after 3 hours of work. The modifications are complete. Amy reported. I have no idea if they will work, but they are the best we can do with what we have. The engines are ready, Rick said. I've never flown through a dimensional barrier before, but I guess there's a first time for everything. Sam finished loading his equipment. The charges are prepared. If we can find the antimatter reaction, I can try to contain it. Jake looked at his team. They were about to attempt something that the galaxy's best scientists said was impossible. But 43 miners were counting on them, and time was running out. All right, people, he said. Let's go save some lives. The Swift Arrow's engines came back online, and the ship began moving toward the dimensional anomaly. Across the galaxy, millions of beings held their breath as the humans prepared to do the impossible once again. The Swift Arrow approached the dimensional barrier around Kepler 442b, with its jury-rigged modifications humming at dangerous levels. Jake Morrison gripped his chair as the ship began to shake violently. Through the view screen, he could see space itself twisting and bending like heated glass. Beginning entry sequence, Rick Davis announced from the pilot's seat. His hands moved quickly across the controls, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Hull modifications are holding so far. Dr. Amy Foster watched her instruments with growing concern. The dimensional stress is higher than I calculated. The hull plating is already showing microfractures. Will it hold? Jake asked. Maybe, if we're lucky. The ship pushed through the barrier, and reality seemed to fold around them. For a moment, Jake felt like he was falling upward while moving sideways through time. His stomach lurched, and the lights flickered as the ship's systems struggled to cope with the twisted physics. "We're through the barrier," Rick said, his voice tight with concentration. "But I have no idea where we are." Through the view screen, they could see a landscape that made no sense. The planet below them was there, but it was also not there. Mountains existed in multiple locations at once. The sky was purple on one side and green on the other, with a sun that cast shadows in impossible directions. "The navigation system is completely confused," Rick continued. "According to the sensors, we're traveling in 3 different directions at the same time." Amy studied her readings with fascination and horror. The space inside the pocket dimension is folded on itself. Distance and direction don't work the same way here. "Can you find the mining station?" Jake asked. "I'm trying, but the sensors are giving me contradictory readings. Wait. There's something big about 2 kilometers that way." She pointed toward what looked like empty space. Rick began steering the ship toward Amy's coordinates, but the moment he changed course, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The hull modifications that had seemed stable moments before suddenly started failing. "Hull breach in Section 7, Sam Miller called out from the engineering station. "The dimensional stress is tearing the plating apart. Can you fix it?" Jake asked. "Not while we're moving through this twisted space. The stress patterns keep changing." Rick gritted his teeth and kept flying. "If I stop now, we might never find the mining station. This place is like a maze that keeps rearranging itself." The ship shuddered as another section of hull plating failed. Emergency lights flashed, and the air recycling system began making strange noises. Jake could feel the ship falling apart around them, but they were too deep in the pocket dimension to turn back now. "There," Amy pointed at the view screen. "I can see the mining station." The Zephyrian mining platform hung in space ahead of them, but it looked wrong. Parts of it existed in multiple dimensions at once, creating a confusing double image. The station's lights flickered between different colors, and its metal hull seemed to ripple like water. "Is anyone alive over there?" Jake asked. Amy ran a bioscan. "I'm detecting life signs, but they're strange. It's like the crew is existing in several different time states simultaneously." As they approached the station, the Swift Arrow's problems got worse. The artificial gravity generator exploded with a shower of sparks, leaving the crew floating in zero gravity. The navigation computer crashed, displaying only error messages in languages that didn't exist. "This is bad," Rick said, fighting to control the ship without proper instruments. "I can't dock with the station. The spatial distortions are too severe." Sam unbuckled himself from his seat and pushed off toward the emergency equipment locker. "I can use the charges to blast us a docking port in the station's hull." "Sam, no," Amy said. "The explosions might destabilize the entire pocket dimension. Then what do you suggest?" Amy looked at her instruments, most of which were now showing impossible readings. "I need to recalibrate the antimatter containment from inside the station. But the only way to get there is through the maintenance airlocks." "Those are designed for Zephyrians," Jake said. "They're too small for humans." "Then we'll have to make them bigger," Sam replied, pulling out his cutting tools. Back on Station Prime, the monitoring station was tracking the human mission with growing alarm. High Counselor Thane watched as the Swift Arrow's signal became increasingly erratic. "We're losing contact with the human ship," his aide reported. "The dimensional interference is disrupting all communications." "What was their last position?" Sekthara asked. "Inside the pocket dimension. They found the mining station, but their ship appears to be failing." Thane pulled up historical records on his screen. "This is how it always begins with humans. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong. But somehow they keep working through the problems. What if they fail this time? Then the pocket dimension will consume the entire star system, and we'll have to evacuate 3 billion people from nearby worlds." On the screen, they could see energy readings from the pocket dimension fluctuating wildly. Whatever the humans were doing, it was affecting the entire anomaly aboard the Swift Arrow. The situation continued to deteriorate. The ship's life support was failing, the hull was cracking in multiple places, and the crew was working in zero gravity with emergency lighting. Any other species would have given up by now, But the humans kept pushing forward. "I've got the cutting tools ready," Sam announced. "But I need to get close to the station to use them." Rick was piloting the ship using nothing but visual references and instinct. The normal instruments were useless in the twisted space of the pocket dimension. "I can get us close, but I can't guarantee a stable position. That's good enough," Jake said. "Amy, what do you need to fix the antimatter containment?" "I need to access the station's main computer and manually reset the containment field. But the process has to be done from inside the reactor chamber." "How dangerous is that?" "Under normal circumstances, it would be instantly fatal. But since we're in a pocket dimension where physics doesn't work properly, I have no idea what will happen." Jake looked around at his team. They were floating in a damaged ship, surrounded by twisted space, trying to fix a problem that the galaxy's best scientists had declared impossible. It was exactly the kind of situation that humans seemed to thrive in. "All right," he said. "Sam, cut us away into the station. Rick, hold us steady. Amy, get ready to work some magic with that antimatter reactor." "What about you?" Amy asked. "I'm going to help however I can. That's what I do." Sam fired up his cutting tools and began working on the station's hull. Sparks flew in strange patterns as the metal cut differently in the altered physics of the pocket dimension. The holes he created were perfectly round in some dimensions, and square in others. "This is completely insane," Amy muttered as she prepared her equipment. "We're about to enter a radioactive reactor chamber in a place where the laws of physics have broken down." "You got a better idea?" Jake asked. "Actually, no. This is probably our only chance." Rick managed to position the swift arrow next to the mining station, using a combination of thruster control and pure stubbornness. The ship groaned under the dimensional stress, but it held together long enough for Sam to finish cutting and opening. "Entry point is ready," Sam announced. "But I should warn you, the station's internal gravity is working in reverse." "We'll be walking on the ceiling." "Of course it is," Jake said. "Nothing about this mission has been normal so far." The team prepared to enter the mining station, knowing that they were about to face even greater challenges inside. The pocket dimension was unstable, their ship was falling apart, and they had no backup plan. But 43 miners were counting on them, and failure wasn't an option. As they prepared to transfer to the station, Amy looked at the readings from her instruments one more time. "Jake, there's something else. The temporal distortions inside the station are getting worse. We might not have much time before the entire pocket dimension collapses." "How much time?" "Maybe an hour, maybe less," Jake nodded grimly. "Then we better work fast." The team moved through the improvised airlock into the mining station, where they would face the most dangerous part of their mission. Behind them, the swift arrow continued to deteriorate, its systems failing one by one. They were committed. Now, with no way back except through success across the galaxy, millions of beings watched the energy readings from the pocket dimension spike and fluctuate. The humans were doing something that was affecting the entire anomaly, but nobody could predict what would happen next. In the monitoring station on Station Prime, High Counselor Thane watched the displays with a mixture of admiration and terror. "They're actually doing it," he said quietly. "They're working inside the pocket dimension. Will they succeed?" Zekthara asked. "With humans, anything is possible. That's what makes them so dangerous." Jake Morrison pushed through the airlock into the mining station and immediately understood why the Swift Arrow's sensors had been so confused. The inside of the station existed in multiple places at once. He could see the same corridor stretching in 3 different directions, each leading to a different version of the same room. "This is worse than I thought," Amy Foster said, floating beside him in the reversed gravity. "The temporal distortions are so severe that the station is stuck in a loop." "What kind of loop?" Jake asked. "Time is repeating itself over and over. Look." She pointed down one of the corridors. Jake could see Zephyrian miners walking through their daily routine. They moved to their workstations, ran their equipment, and checked their readings. But every 15 minutes, they would flicker and return to the exact same positions, starting the entire sequence again. "They're trapped," Sam Miller said, watching the ghostly figures repeat their actions. They have no idea what's happening to them. Rick Davis was studying the station's layout, trying to make sense of the twisted architecture. How do we get to the reactor chamber if the station keeps changing? Amy pulled out her scanner and tried to get readings on the temporal loop. The loop is centered on the moment when the antimatter containment failed. The station keeps trying to return to that exact instant time. Can we break the loop? Jake asked. Maybe, but we need to understand what caused it first. The antimatter reaction created this pocket dimension, but something else is maintaining the temporal loop. They made their way through the station, passing the same Zephyrian miners over and over again. The miners couldn't see them, couldn't hear them, and had no idea that time was repeating itself. They were stuck in the same 15 minutes for what might have been days. There, Amy said, pointing to a heavily shielded door. That's the reactor chamber. The antimatter containment system is just beyond that door. But as they approached, the door suddenly wasn't there anymore. The corridor rearranged itself, and they found themselves back at the airlock where they had started. The station reset itself, Rick said. We're back where we began. The temporal loop affects the entire structure, Amy realized. Every 15 minutes, everything returns to its original position, including us. Jake looked at his watch. They had been inside the station for 14 minutes. In 1 minute, they would be back at the airlock, forced to start over again. So how do we reach the reactor if we keep getting reset? Sam asked. Amy was thinking furiously. We need to move faster than the loop can reset us. We have 15 minutes to get from the airlock to the reactor chamber. How far is it? According to the station plans, about 10 minutes if we take the direct route. But the direct route doesn't exist anymore. The station's layout keeps changing. The 15-minute mark passed, and suddenly they were all back at the airlock. The Zephyrian miners flickered and began their routine again. Jake felt disoriented, like he was waking up from a dream. Okay, he said. Now I understand why the galaxy finds this stuff terrifying. Let's try again. They moved through the station faster this time, but the constantly changing layout made it impossible to reach the reactor chamber. Every corridor led to a different destination than it should. Rooms existed in multiple locations at once. Gravity worked differently in every section. After the third reset, Jake was getting frustrated. There has to be a way to break this loop. Amy was studying her readings more carefully. Wait a minute. The temporal distortions aren't random. They're following a pattern based on the antimatter reaction. What kind of pattern? The loop resets every 15 minutes because that's when the antimatter containment failed in the original timeline. But the failure wasn't instantaneous. It took place over several seconds. So if we can be in the reactor chamber at the exact moment of the failure, we might be able to interrupt the loop. Sam checked his explosive charges. How do we time it that precisely? We don't, Amy said. We use the loop itself. We need to be in 3 places at once. Jake stared at her. Come again? The pocket dimension allows for multiple versions of the same space to exist simultaneously. If we split up and take different routes, we can arrive at the reactor chamber from 3 different timelines. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Rick sighed. It is. If we get the timing wrong, we could be erased from existence. Or we could create a paradox that destroys the pocket dimension completely. Jake thought about it for a moment. The plan sounded completely insane, but that was nothing new for their missions. What do you need us to do? Rick, you need to take the maintenance tunnels. Sam, you go through the cargo bays. I'll take the direct route through the main corridors. We all need to reach the reactor chamber at exactly the same time. How will we coordinate without communications? Sam asked. We count. The loop resets every 15 minutes exactly. We start moving at the 12-minute mark, and we should all arrive at the reactor chamber at the 14-minute mark. And then what? Jake asked. Then I try to manually reset the antimatter containment while you and the others prevent the original failure from happening. How do we prevent something that already happened? By making it not happen. If we can interrupt the cascade failure, At the exact moment it occurs, we can break the temporal loop and stabilize the pocket dimension. Back on Station Prime, the monitoring station was receiving increasingly strange readings from the Kepler system. High Counselor Thane watched as the energy signatures from the pocket dimension began fluctuating in complex patterns. "What are the humans doing now?" Zekthara asked. "Something that our physics models say is impossible," Thane replied. "They appear to be manipulating the temporal distortions themselves." "Is that even possible?" "With humans, we have learned not to use that word." Inside the mining station, the team prepared for their most dangerous attempt yet. They had studied the station's layout during multiple resets, mapping out the routes they would need to take. "Remember," Amy said, "we have exactly 2 minutes to reach the reactor chamber. If anyone is late, the whole plan fails." "What if someone gets lost?" Rick asked. "Then we try again next loop, but we're running out of time." The pocket dimension is becoming more unstable with each reset. Jake looked at his team. "All right, people, let's do something impossible." They split up at the 12-minute mark, each taking their assigned route through the twisted station. Jake followed Amy through the main corridors, watching as she navigated the constantly changing layout with a combination of scientific knowledge and pure intuition. The station seemed to fight them at every turn. Corridors led to rooms that shouldn't exist. Elevators moved sideways instead of up and down. Doors opened onto empty space or solid walls, but somehow they kept moving forward. Rick's voice came through the communication system occasionally, reporting his progress through the maintenance tunnels. Sam checked in from the cargo bays. Where gravity was working in all directions at once, with 30 seconds to spare, they all arrived at the reactor chamber. The room was a maze of pipes, computers, and containment fields. At the center was the antimatter reactor itself, a sphere of energy that flickered between different states of existence. "There," Amy said, pointing to a control panel. That's the containment system. I need to reset it manually." But as she reached for the controls, the reactor chamber suddenly filled with Zephyrian miners from the original timeline. They were performing their routine maintenance, unaware that they were about to trigger the cascade failure that would create the pocket dimension. "We're here at the exact moment of the accident," Jake realized. "We're witnessing the original antimatter failure." Amy worked frantically at the controls, trying to reset the containment field before the cascade could begin. Sam positioned his explosive charges around the reactor, ready to contain any antimatter that might escape. Rick monitored the temporal readings, watching as past and present began to merge. "The containment field is failing," Amy announced. "I can't stop it from this console." "Then we need to get inside the containment field itself," Jake said. "That's suicide." "The antimatter will destroy anything that gets too close." "Not if we time it right?" "If we enter the field at the exact moment of the failure, we might be able to stabilize it from inside." Amy stared at him. "Jake, that's the most insane plan you've ever had. And that's saying something. Do you have a better idea?" "No, but if this doesn't work, we'll be vaporized instantly. And if we don't try, the pocket dimension will keep expanding until it destroys everything." Jake looked at the antimatter reactor, its energy field crackling with power that could tear apart atoms. The Zephyrian miners from the past continued their work, unaware that in a few seconds, their routine maintenance would trigger a disaster that would trap them in a temporal loop. "All right," he said. "Let's go stop a cascade failure from the inside of an antimatter reactor." The team prepared to enter the containment field, knowing that they were about to attempt something that violated every known law of physics, but that had never stopped them before. As the original antimatter failure began, Jake and his team stepped forward into the energy field, ready to rewrite history itself. Jake Morrison stepped into the antimatter containment field and felt reality bend around him. The energy that should have vaporized him instantly instead felt like walking through warm water. The twisted physics of the pocket dimension had changed. The rules once again, and somehow the antimatter couldn't harm them while they existed in multiple timelines at once. This is completely impossible, Amy Foster said as she worked at the reactor controls from inside the energy field. We're standing inside a reaction that generates temperatures hotter than the center of a star. Don't question it, Jake replied. Just fix it. Around them, the Zephyrian miners from the past continued their routine maintenance, completely unaware that 4 humans from the future were working to prevent their accident. The temporal loop had created a moment where past and present existed in the same space, allowing the team to literally rewrite history. Sam Miller placed his explosive charges at key points around the antimatter core. The charges are ready. When Amy resets the containment field, I can stabilize the reaction with controlled explosions. Controlled explosions inside an antimatter reactor, Rick Davis said from his position at the temporal monitoring station. Only humans would think that's a reasonable solution. Amy's hands moved quickly across the control panels, making adjustments that the original Zephyrian engineers had never thought to try. The cascade failure is beginning. I can see the exact moment when the containment field starts to collapse. Can you stop it? Jake asked. Not stop it, but I can redirect it. Instead of creating a pocket dimension, the antimatter reaction will collapse in on itself. What does that mean? It means the explosion will be contained within the reactor chamber. The mining station will survive, the temporal loop will break, and the pocket dimension will collapse back into normal space. And us? We should be fine, probably. Jake watched as Amy worked with equipment that shouldn't function under these conditions, using physics that shouldn't exist to solve a problem that shouldn't be solvable. It was exactly the kind of situation that made the galaxy nervous about human intervention. Cascade failure in 10 seconds, Amy announced. Sam, get ready with those charges. Ready? Sam replied, his finger on the detonator. Rick, monitor the temporal readings. If this works, the loop should break immediately. Monitoring, Rick confirmed. Jake stood in the center of the antimatter reactor, watching past and present merge around him. The Zephyrian miners were performing the same maintenance that had originally caused the disaster. But this time, things would be different. Now, Amy shouted. She pressed the reset button on the containment field at the exact moment Sam detonated his charges. The combination of redirected antimatter and controlled explosions created a chain reaction that defied every known law of physics. The reactor chamber filled with blinding light as the antimatter core collapsed in on itself. The temporal distortions twisted into impossible shapes, then snapped back into normal configuration like a rubber band returning to its original form. For a moment, Jake felt like he was falling through time itself. Past, present, and future blurred together in a kaleidoscope of possibilities. Then everything went quiet. When the light faded, they were standing in a normal reactor chamber. The antimatter core hummed peacefully behind its containment field. The Zephyrian miners looked around in confusion, suddenly aware that something had changed, but not sure what. Status report, Jake said. Amy checked her instruments. Antimatter containment is stable. Temporal readings are normal. The pocket dimension has collapsed completely. The mining station, Rick asked, back in normal space. All crew members are alive and unharmed. And us? Still here? Still alive? Still in violation of several fundamental laws of physics. Jake looked around the reactor chamber. Everything appeared normal, but he could still feel the lingering effects of the twisted space they had just escaped. Time to get out of here. They made their way back to the Swift Arrow, which had somehow survived its journey through the pocket dimension, despite losing most of its hull plating and internal systems. Rick managed to pilot the damaged ship back to normal space, where they were immediately surrounded by Zephyrian rescue vessels. "This is mining station controller to human vessel," came a voice over the communications system. "We have just experienced a temporal anomaly. Our crew reports that you prevented a catastrophic antimatter failure." "How did you accomplish this?" Jake picked up the microphone. "We fixed the problem." There was a long pause. "Could you be more specific?" "We went into the pocket dimension, broke the temporal loop, and redirected the antimatter cascade." "Standard procedure." Another pause, even longer this time. "Standard procedure? For humans, yeah." Back on Station Prime, the emergency protocols were finally being deactivated. The blast doors opened, and aliens began emerging from their shelters. High Counselor Thames stood in the monitoring station, staring at the displays that showed normal readings from the Kepler system. "They did it," he said to his aide. "The humans actually solved the problem. How?" Zekthara asked, joining them at the monitors. "According to our readings, they manipulated time itself. They entered the pocket dimension, traveled to the moment of the original accident, and prevented it from happening." "That's impossible. With humans, that word has lost all meaning." Ambassador Zekthara looked at the peaceful readings from her mining station. "All 43 crew members are safe. The antimatter reactor is functioning normally. It's as if the accident never happened." "But it did happen," Thun said. "And then the humans made it not happen. Our physics department will be studying this for decades." On the main screen, they could see the swift arrow limping back towards Station Prime. The human ship was barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and sheer stubbornness. But it was carrying a crew that had just accomplished the impossible. "We need to update our protocols," Thane said quietly. "What kind of updates?" his aide asked. "The current human intervention protocol requires evacuation to 5-star systems. I think we need to make it 10. 10-star systems? Maybe 15? We clearly underestimated their capabilities." As the swift arrow docked at Station Prime, Jake and his team were greeted by a small crowd of aliens who had been brave enough to come out of the shelters. Most kept their distance, but Ambassador Zekthara approached them directly. "Commander Morrison," she said, "on behalf of the Zephyrian Mining Consortium, I want to thank you for saving our people." "Just doing our job," Jake replied. "How did you know your plan would work?" Jake shrugged. "We didn't. But someone had to try." Zekthara stared at him. "You risked your lives on a plan that might not have worked?" "That's pretty much what we always do." As the team headed toward the human quarters, Jake could hear whispered conversations among the aliens. Words like impossible, reckless, and terrifying came up frequently. He was starting to understand why the galaxy had developed such elaborate safety protocols around human intervention. Dr. Amy Foster caught up with him in the corridor. "Jake, do you realize what we just did? We saved some miners. We manipulated time, redirected an antimatter cascade, and collapsed the pocket dimension using jury-rigged equipment and explosives. The scientific community is going to study this mission for centuries." "Good for them," Amy stared at him. "Doesn't it bother you that we keep doing things that should be impossible?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "Not really. If something needs to be done, you find a way to do it. That's just common sense." "Common sense," Amy repeated. "Right." As they reached the human quarters, an announcement came over the station's communication system. "Attention all personnel. The Galactic Council has approved new emergency protocols regarding human intervention. Effective immediately, when any human uses the phrase 'Fine, I got this,' all non-essential personnel must evacuate to a minimum distance of 10-star systems." Jake looked around at his team. 10-star systems? "That seems excessive." "Does it?" Rick asked. "We just broke the laws of physics to solve a problem. Again, that was different. We had a good plan." "Jake," Sam said quietly, "our plan involved standing inside an antimatter reactor while detonating explosives. Most species would consider that suicide. But it worked. That's exactly what makes them nervous." As they settled into their quarters, Jake received a message on his personal communicator. It was from the Galactic Council requesting a full report on their mission. The message also included a note that several major insurance companies had updated their policies to exclude damage caused by human intervention in impossible situations. Jake deleted the message and sat down to file his routine mission report. Under Mission Summary, he wrote, "Mining station rescued. Antimatter containment stabilized. Temporal anomaly resolved. No injuries. Request next assignment." He submitted the report and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, he could see alien ships maintaining a respectful distance from Station Prime. The galaxy was giving them space. probably hoping that the humans wouldn't volunteer for any more impossible missions, but Jake knew better. Tomorrow there would be another crisis, another impossible problem that needed solving, and when that happened, he would stand up and say the words that sent the galaxy into quarantine. "Fine, I got this."